Thank you, everybody, for showing up to another episode of Your Day with David, episode 12. So, this is my buddy Matt. Actually lives down the hall from me. And this marks officially then 3 months now that we've been doing the podcast. So, kind of a maybe a small landmark, but pretty significant for me, I suppose. And certainly been able to fill my life with a lot of passion. But um, and I keep forgetting, so I'll say this now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It really helps me, and also like and comment so that I know certain topics that you guys might want to hear us talk about. But what I will be talking primarily about with Matt, and he'll be able to share a story, is um, essentially the importance of therapy, working through relationships, and then ultimately at the end too, if the relationship doesn't work out, what happens next, and how do you go from there? Especially in his case with the family. And I'll kind of, again, the way I got to meet Matt, um, I think, well, again, since he lives in my apartment complex, kind of just in passing, walking the dogs, saying hi, whatnot. I actually Matt, I lived here before Matt did, and I got to watch him move in with his family, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and at the time too, you had Ramses, the family
That's
dog,
right.
if I'm
Yep.
not mistaken. Okay,
Yep.
who's
That's
no
right.
longer with us, unfortunately. But um, I guess I will quickly open up the floor to you, Matt, if you want to kind of give a little bit of background on yourself, and then we can go from there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a real pleasure, David, to come on today and be a part of your podcast. Yeah, just a little bit about me from a relatively high level. So I was born in Oklahoma, um, and born and raised a Sooner my entire life. I went to a small liberal arts university called Southern Nazarene University in Oklahoma. That's where I met my soon-to-be ex, but my wife Heather, and after I graduated, we went to University of Kansas for my doctoral studies. I got my PhD in organic chemistry. Toward the end of that time, we were not necessarily planning on having kids at that time, but through just circumstances, we ended up having our first child right before I finished my dissertation, and defended my dissertation. And so we had a baby, and then moved not long after that to California. I was there for 2.5 years, and then my first job out of school, because that was during my postdoc, was out at Stanford in California. Brought me here to St. Louis. So that's how I came here to St. Louis. Moved here in 2006. Um, yeah, and just I worked for Pfizer, took a slight career detour, and then worked for Monsanto. Now I work for Bayer, and yeah, just typical living life at that point, professional life, family. We had our second child in 2007, our daughter Emery, and like I said, just living life and absolutely loving St. Louis. And then I'm sure with some of the part of the story that we'll get into today, life happens and relationships have ups and downs, and sometimes those challenges, as I've learned, are no matter how hard you try, are unfixable. So um, at I guess in the spring of 2021, I moved in here to this apartment, at the time separated from my wife and family. And then in the summer of 2021, I moved forward with proceeding with divorce. And so, yeah, I'm sure as we'll get into more details, but that's how I came here. And then met David and his girlfriend not long after moving in. And as David said, my dog Ramses was here staying with me, and he was sick with cancer. And when he passed away, David was generous enough to and thoughtful enough to provide cookies as a gift of sympathy to me. And as I told David after I got the cookies, he does not realize how passionate I am about cookies. Those are my favorite dessert, and it was a real just thoughtful gesture, but also something I really enjoyed. So that's kind of my high level story of how I got from Oklahoma to enjoying David's cookies.
Well, there you go. And yeah, I guess it's interesting because you're still very much quite in the middle of going through the divorce, if you
Sure.
will. And it's been a pretty drawn out process. I think. I mean, you've obviously I've been almost to the 1 year mark of living here, but I guess you probably would have moved in a few months after me.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess with the kids and all that too, how does that work when you're juggling, schedules and stuff like that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so basically, what happened when I left the home in the fall of 2020 is, um, my desire when I left the home was really for not only self-care, but also for what I felt was the good of my family, giving my family, my wife and I, myself, the space to really kind of pull out from some of the toxic experiences that I was enduring, and I know that the kids were experiencing at the house. So, when I pulled out, I think my initial goal, when talking with my counselor, is to really establish those key things, those tactical things like childcare and stuff. My kids are relatively old at the time; they were 17 and 14. So not necessarily, still obviously needed our help and support, but less so than young children. But we still needed to talk about childcare and really parenting time. And so my goal at the initial time was to really kind of set those parameters, and with the help of a mediator. And it again, not to get into details, but it was a really actually rough experience trying to do that.
Hmm.
And so we ended up just kind of, for lack of a better word, tumbling along like a tumbleweed of saying, okay, this is where we set up right now and where we've agreed, and to allow that initial separation to happen. And then my wife had a different perspective on that. Like, we're going to stick with this. I was like, no, I did this to just get out of the house. Now I want more time with the kids. So it was actually another kind of point of contention.
Yeah.
So anyway, but long story short, I mean, we eventually settled in on time, and we have a certain number of days that I have per week. um, and again, the kids being as old as they are, it's we've left it up to them and agreed to them that they are more than welcome to stay over at my apartment on my days, but the house is less than 10 minutes away.
Right.
So if they want to stay in their room, that's comfortable for them. I'm giving them that freedom. And so sometimes they stay over here, although that's pretty rare. So they'll be
Mhm.
here on my days. And then when the evening comes around, I have to go home to finish studies or after dinner. Then they go home and they go to bed in their bed. So that's kind of
Mhm.
how that works out.
Yeah, because I my experience, um, or the reason why I really enjoy having you on the show is I have a multitude of people that I have in my friend group that either are in relationships that they're not happy with. That includes both being married and not married, and then also going through divorce,
Mhm.
both with families involved, and so hearing how you can work through that, and like you said, sometimes it takes that outside mediator to,
Mhm.
because again, unbiased third opinion. Can you? And again, the point of this is not by any means just a bashing session on
Oh yeah.
anyone's
Yeah.
side. So
Yep.
let's clarify that as well,
Yep.
because again, it takes two to tango. Relationships that
Absolutely. Yep.
um, compromise is important. But I guess what were some big things, because you were married for quite some time.
Yep.
Um, what were some things that after years of trying to work on it that you just like you said couldn't fix, if
Sure.
you will?
Sure. No, it's yeah. So we were married in 1998. So at the time of my leaving the house, that would have been, my goodness, I mean, yeah, 22 years, of marriage. So um, yeah, I mean, it's a common refrain when you hear about some of these broken relationships, especially ones that have been broken for a long time, is that um, over time, just drifting apart and not having that relational connection. And by let's say that time of my leaving, I just felt like we were in like a roommate relationship, just none of
Mm,
that kind of relational intimacy. But beyond that, I mean, I think there were just um, a lot of wounds from our own personal experiences, our own personal stories that we never addressed appropriately individually, and then therefore weren't able to connect relationally together with them as a true partnership. And so, again, speaking to my own story, I had a lot of I do and continue to struggle with a lot of issues with regards to performance, with regards to people pleasing, with regards to um, trying to be the one to fix, trying to be the one to you know to take responsibility, to be the first one to say I'll own this, I'll do this. And while I think there's some healthy aspects too, I think there are also some really um, harmful aspects. And I think one of the things that I know that I did is over time learned that there was a lot of pain that I caused by just doing things for the sake of doing them, right? Instead of out
mm,
of love, it was out of I wanted to placate, or I wanted to even maybe manipulate a little, right?
mm,
Say, I'm afraid to ask for what I really want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dance around the issue, or I'm going to, so I think there's just pieces that you begin to understand about yourself. But I think really, if I were to say, so I've kind of stated a high level. Well, let's get down maybe to maybe a more very specific level. Is I experienced my first battle with acute anxiety and depression in 2009 when Pfizer, my first job, again they closed their research site here in St. Louis, and so I lost my
mm,
job and really slipped into anxiety, depression, very difficult. Was able to fight through that with the help of medication and counseling, support from friends and family and my church. I mean, everything. Um, and it took a good solid maybe year and a half to really kind of come out of that. Eventually was able to wean off my medication, and so I thought, oh, that was interesting. That was really difficult time, but I'm glad that I got through it. Um, and then in 2019, I experienced another battle, and that was again somewhat work related. And that Bayer had bought Monsanto, and so I think that triggered maybe some experiences with that. But
mm.
again, I think what ended up happening through that part of the story is I realized, okay, there's something now more fundamentally wrong here. It's not just an episode, there's something deeper. And that's when
Yeah.
I really started to get into counseling and dig deep into what are some of those fundamental issues with me and my story that is impacting this, or that is might be root causes. And what it really came down to is, I had a lot of shame built up in my story, and I had a lot of regret and challenges with intimacy and identity. So identity of who I was, but also this intimacy piece. And as I began to come out of that and really start to breathe again, I started to realize there were some really deep hurts going on in my marriage relationship. Like the fact that I felt so disconnected from the woman who I was supposed to be loving and she was supposed to be loving me, that made me feel really alone and really anxious, about
Yeah.
how dysfunctional our relationship was. Um, and so, again, not to get into details of her side of the story, but the pains that she was bringing on me, I really began to identify as her issues, not mine. Again, not taking them on for like that. Maybe the habit before is it's me, it's me, it's me. I've got to fix it. And I started to kind of draw a boundary and say, no, like there are certain things that are me, but then there are certain things that are you. And I'm asking you and inviting you to change. And
Mhm.
so we started to go to counseling in January, February of 2020. And we had been before, but I would say it'd be more band-aid counseling in the past. But this was a real invitation to say, let's go for fundamental change because that's what we need. And that's what I felt we needed. And we did. We tried that, and it was very difficult. Um, our counselor eventually suggested that my wife go to individual counseling because of some challenges she was having with maybe addressing some of her own story, that then prohibited our from engaging in an intimate way. Again, not that it was all her. I had my own stuff, but on her side. And she started to do that, and the experiences and the wounds that she was projecting to me actually got worse. And so I started to again feel the pain and the experience her side of her wounds coming onto me, to the point to where again I learned I have to draw a boundary. I have to be able to say, this is not my stuff, this is your stuff, and I'm here to support you, but I can't continue to be experiencing this and be safe for myself and safe for the kids. And
Mhm.
so then that's when, in you know August 2020, I felt like, in order to give space, in order to give myself time to heal, give my wife time to heal, with the goal of hopefully that reconciliation and that fundamental change in relationship happening, I left the house. And so since then, it's been, a challenge, and now we are where we are today. But my goal for
Mhm.
originally leaving was not to break the marriage, but to give it space to heal. So,
Yeah. Um, when you say a couple issues, like root issues in the relationship, one of them you said was performance.
yep,
Uh, um, what does that mean to you?
sure.
Performance in a relationship.
Yeah. So I think, if you, again, this is all work that I've done with my counselor, and just kind of introspection as well. But I think you really begin to look back on your own family dynamic. And I think there were real challenges with especially my father, who, in a way, I think I've read this thing called like the golden child syndrome, of where,
Mm,
my dad, absolutely, I know without a doubt he loves me, like fundamentally. So that's good. That being said, I think because of his own story, he kind of projected a lot of his worth and a lot of his meaning on what I did. And so even though he would tell me he loved me, and even though he would show me he loved me, which I'm sure that he does, the way I experienced that love was based on how what I did. So how
mm,
good at grades I did, how good I did in my sports, how many, gifts he would tell me that I had. And I felt like I had this, and unknowingly probably felt like I had this expectation to perform. Um, I think then another perform in other in order to be accepted. Performance isn't
mm,
bad, we know that, right? But performance in order to be accepted. And then in my own story from my faith background, is the way I experienced my father, then translated on how I experienced God, which God was, no matter what he said in the scriptures, it was not about him loving me because of his love. It was, he loved me because of what I did, and if I was good or if I was
mm,
bad. So then again, that was performance, performance, performance. And that then translates into how I bring that perspective into relationship, which is, you know, my it's my job to achieve and to perform in order to be loved and accepted. I can't really just be me. I can't really just be flawed, because no way someone would really love me just for me and me and being flawed, but it has to do with me. And so, and how I perform. So then that would translate into how I would do relationship, instead of just maybe being open and being vulnerable and saying, man, this is who yeah, I'm just really struggling here. Or I have to let you know that I feel I've been hurt because of what you've done. Instead, it was, okay, what's the problem? What can I do to fix it? And therefore, I'm going to move forward and try to fix it in order to gain your love, in order to gain your acceptance, and in order to fix the relationship. I'm going to do. Um, and that can be, one, exhausting, but two, it can also come across, and I'm sure my wife experienced it, as, do you really love me, and do you really want to be intimate, or are you just doing this to
check the
protect yourself,
box.
check the box, protect yourself, and perform?
Mm,
So it's a long answer, but hopefully it kind of gives you that background of the dynamic that I experience.
mm. So like buying flowers out of obligation as opposed to like, oh, like I actually wanted to buy you flowers today as a kind
Yeah,
of an
or
example.
or even, let's say, even saying I'm sorry. Like, I think there are a lot of times where I meant that I was really sorry and owned what I did. I don't think I have a problem with that. But I think there are also some times where I'm just like, man, I just want this argument to end, or I just
Mm,
want, you know, I just want to move forward and not deal with her stuff. And so I'm going to say I'm sorry. But I'm really not, you know. Um, and that ends up being self-protection and selfish, and not saying, how did I hurt you? Like, how did I really, like, where is my stuff in this? And how can I own that so I can love you well? No, it was just, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I won't, I won't do that again. But then I'm moving away with a sense of of resentment instead of
right.
real forgiveness, right?
Yeah. It's one thing that I kind of struggled with in prior relationships. Kind of the opposite side of, if I was the flip side of your story there, which was, you know, me and a partner would get into some type of argument, and then, I always try to actually like resolve the root issue of what it is. But a lot of people as well, like, there's everyone has different levels of emotional intelligence and where they're
Yep.
at and handling that. And so, this person would always just be like, well, can we just drop it? Can we just drop it? And like, so they would just want to move on one sidedly, but not just like you said, not to actually like solve the argument and like why it happened, but just because they want to be done with it.
Right.
And so like the person I am, and I don't know if this was the right way. And I wouldn't want to drop things. I say, no, like this is a problem. Like we need to talk about this, but that would just cause uh maybe ironically more resentment. Like, hey, like I don't want to talk about this. I want to move on from this. Like why do we have to make this into something more? But um uh, so I guess that's kind of my perspective on that issue of just maybe there is a healthy balance, or sometimes you do have to drop it. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
I'm not very good at that. Um, and I guess, were you like an only sibling growing up? Did you have brothers and sisters, or
Yeah, no, I was the middle child,
mm,
and I have two sisters.
two
So
sisters?
have an older sister, 2 years older, and a younger sister, 5 years younger. Um, and so I was, yeah, the only boy, which is probably somewhat of a dynamic between me and my father. And then the middle child, I tended to be more of the mediator, right? The let's all get along, let's all
Hmm.
manage each other's feelings. And then also just maybe my personality had a little bit to do with that too, just my DNA.
Yeah.
But yeah, middle child. Yeah.
So, because I'm not sure if you know this about me. I'm one of 8 siblings myself, and then I
Mhm.
also have two half brothers as well. So I guess 1 10. But with my family, one of 8, and then I'm third in the lineup. So a kind of a middle child as well.
Yep.
Um, but I never kind of felt that quote unquote pressure, if you will.
Yep.
Most of my pressure was self-inflicted. I wanted to perform well. I wanted to do good in school, sports, extracurriculars. Um, but I came to find out much later um, how different that was for, like, say, my older brother,
Mhm.
the eldest brother, right? You want
Yep.
to talk about like golden child syndrome.
Yeah.
I always remember that he would, you know, spend time with my parents every night just talking. And
Mhm.
I always thought, so, it was such a weird thing to do, right? Because, like, as a kid, like for me, I just want, after sports or whatever, I go home, play
Right.
video games, talk to my friends. And so he, when I talk about like the changing in dynamics between siblings, it was just crazy to see, as my brother kind of shared his side, how much pressure he was put on being the eldest child and all the expectations he felt like he had to meet. And then he also felt, though, because he was in that situation, he thought all the siblings felt that too.
Mhm.
He thought that he wasn't alone in that, and like, oh, like, this was put onto me, not just me, but like all of my kids, all the kids now feel this way about, say, our parents.
Mhm.
And then, it kind of was and some perspective, half my siblings are part of LGBTQ plus community.
Okay.
And we grew up in pretty heavy Christian faith
Yep.
background. And I think it was maybe shocking. I don't want to use the word shocking, but kind of an eye opener that, my brother sharing this, and like I had to tell him, like, I didn't have that same experience. I had when I look back, I almost feel like I had no pressure.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and that was just maybe because I'm not sure why, but I did do well in
right.
most things. And I was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none person, which
Mm,
kind of to this day, bothered me maybe on a more fundamental level of like I always wanted to be great at something instead of being good at everything.
right, right.
Um, like I was a five sport athlete.
Mm,
I did band. I did um, FFA, if you're familiar with what FFA
yep,
is.
yep.
Um, and just, you know, lack of a better term, excelled in my own regard in all those, as well as, taking, um, certain college courses in mathematics. I was an early on an engineer at Iowa State University. So, excelled in math and in calculus and differential equations, all these things, right? And my father was an electrical engineer. So if there was one kind of sense of um, responsibility, if you will, it's like, okay, and this is, it's funny because I remember our school counselor as well, gentleman by the name of Mr. Walker, one of the kindest people you ever meet. And my class was, for our school, pretty gifted as far as intellect goes. My very small town, Iowa, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
class of
Right.
24 people, right? And we had a handful of guys that were just um, worked really hard in school and really intellectual. And it's kind of this thing though of like, I don't really know if I ever really want to be an engineer, but I knew I was good in math, and I didn't know what I would do besides that, right? And so, and since my father was an electrical engineer, I just thought that, oh, why don't I just follow in my father's footsteps
Sure.
and
Yep.
do what he did, right? And my father, a very accomplished man in the industry that he was in for 40 some odd years, and I, was in classes, 4.0 student, and then I kind of, and then a good friend of our family from our hometown, someone in my class, her name was Lizzie, passed away, got in a car accident at a young age, and it was our sophomore year of college. She had stayed in the hometown, and I went off to Iowa State University. And I just remember in the moment, I've shared this on previous episodes, I just started handing in homework blank, you know, and in that moment, I felt like, it's whatever, right? Like, it's not a big deal at all. And I didn't realize how much, like, how impactful it was, because until like my TAs would come up to me because they knew I was like a 4.0 student that
Sure, sure.
wouldn't miss anything, right? And so they'd be in lab class and they come up, they're like, "Hey man, like, are you okay? Like, you just handed in your homework blank." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." Like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm
Right.
good. What's the problem? It's just homework,
Right.
right?" Um, and then that downward spiral happened for pretty much the entirety of the semester. Um, and then kind of when I dug my way out of it, or what allowed me to dig my way out of it was kind of just some introspection and asking myself, what am I doing here? In college, like, what am I trying to do at the end of the day? And it didn't have anything to do with what industry I was in. It was like, what do I want to do, or what do I find value in? Which was, helping people, right?
Mm,
So I do reciprocate that a little bit with you as being kind of a people pleaser, but not to an extreme, but more like I'm a type of person that likes to see everyone happy,
yep.
um, versus just doing what everyone wants. So a little bit of a different dynamic. But again, I want to help people, whatever that meant. And again, I was still a bright kid, that good in math, and so I thought, is there any way where I can help people? Right. This was the good example. Uh, you know, creating impact, right, in life. And you think about being an engineer, and the example I would use to give to everyone was the television, right? And how life changing of an invention the TV was, and how there's like on average in every household like three TVs,
Mhm.
something like that. And no one could tell you though who invented the TV. No one knows, no one cares. And so
Right.
something that has been so influential in every person's life in the entirety of the world, and your name's not even remembered, right? So I want to do work where no matter what I did, whoever I worked with, they would remember my name,
Mm,
right? That was my sense of value and impact, helping
mm,
people, but in a way to where, my legacy, if you
right.
will, um, was established. So that's how I got into at first selling or working in an internship, selling insurance,
Mm,
and trying to help people budget and financial plan and all this stuff. Because I moved to from engineering to a degree in finance,
right.
and then after college, went on to my career now as a financial advisor, and still doing the same thing, but no longer in the insurance world, but more on the investment side of things. And more recently, over the past year, kind of transitioned to more like a relationship manager role where I
Mm,
kind of just grease the wheels, make sure that everyone's happy again.
right.
Um, but I remember when I initially started out, you're working with people that aren't, for lack of what a lot of people would say, are successful, right? People who are in their 50s who have $5,000 to their name.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And didn't grow up with a golden spoon,
mm,
or weren't taught the value of saving your money or investing at a young age, or couldn't, right?
right.
For a number of reasons, whether it's starting families too early or medical injuries,
Yep.
again, a plethora of reasons and excuses. Um, I don't like to use the word excuses, but
Sure.
there
Yeah.
is some aspect of like owning up to saying, hey, like, you know, we know we needed to do better, and where do we start? Um, and I remember, again, trying to find value in the work that I did. Uh, there was this one gentleman that would call me pretty much religiously every week or so,
Mhm,
needing to pull out like $1,000 or something like that. This
mm,
gentleman, and I worked with this guy for a couple of years. Every week he would call me, and then it was kind of heartbreaking. One day, he I told him, I was like, hey, like, this will be the last time that you'll call me because you don't have any money left, kind of
mhm,
thing. And he wasn't terribly old, but he was like maybe 60, 62, who, ideally still had a long way to go in life. And
right.
you think just like he's going to be around for another 20 years.
Mm,
And I just remember like 2 years constantly just telling this guy, like, you know, we need to do what we can to get you some income, get for working again. And he kept
yeah.
saying that no one wanted to hire him. And it's just like this tragic story, just like, man,
Mm,
you want so bad to help every single person out there. Sometimes you do everything you can and it still just doesn't work out.
right.
And it's very similar to some relationships too, where
Mm,
like you want so desperately to make it work. This person that at one point in your life was the most important person to you,
mm,
and maybe still is for some people. And you put in so much effort and so much effort, that you kind of feel like it should just work out, right? With how much energy you put into this, like why is it just not? Why is
mm,
everything not going perfect?
right.
And life just has a funny way of laughing at you, when you think you're working hard and that it should just give you what you want, and it just doesn't.
Right.
um, but that also kind of brings up the conversation of making sure that when you're giving so much, you're not giving too much of yourself away too.
Yeah.
In my aspect, which I did, I gave up a lot of some of my core values in previous relationships, for one reason or another. And because you believe that the relationship is more important than some of these other things, but those things are actually supposed to be a part of the relationship.
Mm,
Um, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, the idea of sunk costs,
mhm,
where um, in the investment world, you buy an investment, it has a certain cost to it, and you can't get that money back, right, at all. It's, if you got that investment today, whatever it cost you, you lost it, even
right.
if you decide to back out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And in our world, the you know person to person world, it's time, right? You invest so much time and energy with these people, and you can never get that time back. And so you'll keep telling yourself over and over again, oh, I was with this person for a year, I was with this person for 5 years, I was with this person for 10 years. like I can't just walk away from that,
Mm,
right?
yep.
Because that would mean that I wasted the last 10 years of my life,
Yes. Yep.
right? In your case is 22 years
Right.
of that, right? That sunken cost of um but uh I think the value in that too is finding out over those last 22 years you look back and say, okay, well, what did I get out of it?
Yes.
I got two, as far as I know, just the two kids, your son
Yep.
and your daughter. Um, and Ramses, who was around it long enough to hopefully get your kids out of school, was the plan. And um, I guess your son will be starting his senior year coming up in the fall, right?
Well,
Although
he's
he's
actually
probably,
just finishing. So now he's 18 and he's just finishing his senior year. Yeah.
oh wow, okay. And I guess, are there lessons or things that you have when you look back on the marriage, you can say, yes, like this at least was the silver lining, or I got this of it and this of it and this out of it? Or are you kind of at a point now where you're just like, you try to just push it all away? Where are you at?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, certainly what you said about the sunk costs and about the time, it is certainly something that I thought about, right? Is like, I've put all, we've put all this time into building what we have, including our family dynamic and not only just financially building what we have, obviously, but more importantly, the relational dynamic and knowing that the decision that I ultimately made to sever the relationship was going to impact not only my wife but also my kids and beyond. So it's not just about time, but it's also about the network and the what you have built and feeling like you're failing on it or you're giving it up. So it is really hard to make that transition and that step and that decision. But of course, you lament and regret. All that's fair and healthy, I think, to a certain extent. But yes, you do have to look back and you have to say there are wonderful things. First and foremost, as you mentioned, the kids. I mean, I have two wonderful kids that I love, that they love me, and that they have a loving mother too. That is unquestionable. Even though our relationship was ultimately broken, they have a loving mother, so that is wonderful. And then just the experiences. I wouldn't be the person that I am today without all of this. And it wasn't all bad. We're not monolithic, you know, um, actors in our own story. We are very complicated, and we have the good and the bad. And so, of course, there were just incredible experiences that I'd never changed, incredible joys. Um, but like I said, the pain and um, the what I ultimately came to understand is that there were only certain things that I could do, and there's only a certain amount that I could give, and I wasn't willing to just feel like I was the only one, or I shouldn't say the only one, but the one that was, trying to relate on what I felt was a healthy level and not getting that in return. Having a lot of judgment, having a lot of anger, having a lot of um, um, you know non-forgiveness on the other side, non-accountability on the other side, saying, well, if I did, the reason I did what I did was because of you, not just I did this because of my own story or I did this because of me and I'm sorry that I hurt you, but no, I did it because of what you did to me. It was only a reaction, which then puts all the burden on me. So there's just, again, I'm getting more into the relational side of the breakup, but of course there was good things um, that I want to reflect on, and then also just remembering about who she is. I mean, this is a complex person who has their own story, and not to absolve her of responsibility, but there's some stuff that you have to look back and say, well, she just hasn't been able to realize because of her own blinders or her own blind spots that are because of the way she was wounded by her family or by her other relationships. And then you feel for her and you hope. And so again, like
Yeah.
I said, it's very complex of this regret, joy, thankfulness, sadness of everything looking back. But it's all part of, like I said, the complex story that we're in.
Yeah, I think, it's so strange because obviously there's a lot of hurt that comes with it, but I mean, at least in my story, you still just want the absolute best for that person,
Mm.
and sometimes the absolute best isn't you though,
Right.
right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
As much as you want it to be, right?
Mhm.
And then timing's weird too, where what's best for you now may, or what's not best for you now may be best for you sometime down the road, but you can't spend that time thinking that way because otherwise you get stuck personally,
Yep.
right? You're not able to move on the way you'd like, and um, I just um, I feel that the, on both sides, when there's so much tension and contention rather,
Mm.
it's almost a kind of a breath of relief for both people. Sometimes if you can step away and look past the hurt, it's like I'm no longer in that,
Right.
right? And I think one thing, when I um, say that some of my core values were sometimes sacrificed in past relationships was like, growing up in such a large family and also a very religious one as well, was um, I've always been a family guy. I've
Mm.
always seen myself as well. My golden number is three.
Yeah.
Three kids, all of them boys, all of them
Right.
athlete stars,
Right.
um, and then your other half, being the type that doesn't want to have kids, right? And that's tough because you have to then make a choice. You're like, okay, well, what's more important to me, you or
Yeah.
this fantasy, this idea
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
um, has not happened yet.
Mhm.
Um, and the logical part of me was always like, well, the person in front of me is what I should be sacrificing
Right.
everything for,
Right.
not this ideal. But
Right.
then the therapist will say, well, what was important to you? Like, why are you trying to build a relationship around this person that doesn't have the same values as you instead of
Exactly. Yep.
building it around someone that does, that can
Yep.
reciprocate?
Yep.
And that was just one of you know many past relationships, whether it was the family aspect, the religious aspect, where to this day, and I try not to talk about too much in my own perspective on the podcast, but I am still very much Christian,
Mm.
although I do know a lot of my friends and even siblings struggle with the idea, or are no longer a part of that faith. um, but I'm also the type of person where I'm not so much the evangelical type of Christian that's going to shove it down your throat.
Sure.
um, I'm more the I've always been a firm believer, and I'm not sure if there is a scripture about it. I think my father told me one time, but um, loving people in such a manner to where that they could tell that you're a man of God,
Mm.
right? Because the way I treat people is the same way that I believe that God loves me. It's
Mm.
essentially what I want to do. So I trying to do my best not to judge people, and being accepting of people, and then understanding everyone's circumstances has always allowed me to ideally, or how I feel like, make friends easier,
Mm.
or because I've been very fortunate as of late to come into new friend group, and um, it has been interesting. I don't know. I'm trying to, this is kind of a new thought that I'm trying to work through right now,
Sure.
but um, it was interesting watching people um, enjoy my presence again, because I had been in a situation where I had pushed a lot of
Mm.
um, my friends away, subconsciously.
Mhm.
Spending more time um, with myself and my partner, and then it got to a point where after you do it enough, um, where when you do it enough, then the people that used to reach out to you no longer reach out to you because they're tired of being told, no from me, that I didn't
Right.
want to spend
Yeah, yeah,
time
yeah.
busy and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, oh,
Sure.
like, they don't want to hang out with me. And it's like, well, they don't want to hang out with you because anytime they tried to hang out with you, you would tell them no.
Right.
Um, and so then, by putting myself in a new environment, I was allowed to kind of grow again into uh, a social butterfly, if you will.
Mhm.
And I'm very much an introverted person. I could spend 2 weeks holed up in my apartment playing video games, watching
Right.
movies, and just working out. If I'm working
Yeah.
out in my apartment and not care, I'm
Right.
perfectly happy doing that. Um, to but I am also, when I am out, a very sociable person. And again, this is not me. I'm just saying what I've been told. Even just last night,
Yeah.
when I just got back. I was telling you before the
Yeah.
podcast started, from a Brad Paisley concert, and the people that I went with, when I tell them, uh, I'm an introvert. When my social battery dies out at 10:30, um, they really didn't believe me, because all they know me is the very sociable person that, and for the months that they've known me, the past, wow, 4 months now, I'm always out.
Mm.
um, and uh, I at this point now, I do salsa dancing 5 nights a week, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And on top of making sure I'm going to the gym 3 times a week, and all this other stuff. So I'm just very always busy, always very active, and then, because of that, always tired. Um, but I've somewhat have forced myself to become an extrovert.
Mm.
What I was telling them, where my natural baseline, if you want to call it a pendulum, my baseline in the middle of where I am is an introvert. And I've forced this pendulum to be on the more extroverted side through my recent breakup,
Mm.
and kind of because I know what happens when I'm not busy. I know what happens when I'm alone, which
Right.
is, all the dark thoughts and all this stuff
Yep.
come rushing in, right? And I think the great thing nowadays that I found is, those thoughts that used to come in that were just so, gut wrenching. They might still be the same thoughts now, but now they're more just thoughts of like, that situation now just sad, right?
Right.
Which is nice for me, because I no longer have that gut wrenching feeling. But um, and I don't very much regret the way, what I had to walk away from, but I do regret the way things played out
Yeah.
afterwards.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and if that was one thing that I wish had went differently, was kind of the aftermath of all that.
Mm.
Kind of like you said, when you're, even with your kids and your family, just the whole, when do you spend time with the kids thing, that just got uglier and
Right.
uglier. Something that, you wish didn't happen, but, because it's the whole point of it was to heal and get, like you said, self care and get better.
Right.
And then in that process, more toxicity is thrown at you. And you're
Right.
just like, gosh, like, what an, awful, I remember thinking like, you know, yeah, it was bad near the end, but then afterwards it was even worse,
Right.
and you're like, how did this happen? Right. How did I allow myself to let this happen?
Yep.
Um, and then the end of the day, it turned out it wasn't me that was letting it happen. Right.
Right.
It was acted upon me,
Right.
for one reason or another.
Well, I think one of the things you brought up that I wanted to piggyback on a little bit was this idea that I think that we have. I think maybe just in general in society, but I would definitely say, and you probably agree with it, in the Christian uh, community, of which I'm a part as well, is this idea that you need to sacrifice for your partner. And I want to affirm that that's 100% true. I think you do. You always have to make sacrifices when in a true relationship. It can't just always be about you, right? But I think the challenge we have, especially, and I got married young. I was 22, almost 23 when I got married. And I was so mature, but I think when I really look back, it was like I think I did have some real concerns, but I didn't allow myself to really look at them, because the way I looked at it was, okay, but I really care about this woman. I love this woman. I love these parts about her. And shouldn't I just forgive the other parts? Shouldn't I just say it's, I have these concerns, but those are mine and I can deal with them. And therefore I should continue to move forward toward this person? That seems wise, right? And it seems like, okay, this is self-sacrificial, or it's true love by putting these things aside. No, I think that was foolish. And the reason being is because I don't think I was really honest with myself. I really wasn't. I really wasn't saying, okay, yes, but what do I really need? And what do I really want in a relationship? And am I willing to be patient and wait for that? And am I willing to have the hard conversation with someone I love and say, you know what? I don't know if this is going to continue.
Yeah,
And I think that is where I I own that. I own the fact that way back when I did care. I did and do still care about this woman. But there were things that were fundamentally flawed in our relationship, and things and wounds that I had already seen whispers of and experienced of, that I wasn't willing to really deal with, because I was feeling like two things. One, I was ready to get married. I wanted to experience being a husband, being a father eventually. So I was ready for that. Um, so that was one thing. But then two, I wasn't willing to have that hard conversation and potentially walk away from something that at the time I felt I invested a lot of time in, 2 years. So for me, it was like, as a people pleaser, as a performer, okay, I can buck up and I can set these things aside. I can sacrifice myself for this person. And that would be one piece of advice that I would say was wrong. I think there is one scripture that I've learned about that I'm still wrestling with, that it says, look not only, it's in Philippians, it's look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. The way I used to always see that scripture was, look to the interests of others. That's good, right? So we should only look to the interests of others, right? No. It says, look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. The encouragement is that you should not only look to your own interests, you should not be 100% selfish. But it's not saying you shouldn't look at your own interests. It's saying you
right.
should do both. And so for me, if I was wise back then, I would have said, yes, I could sacrifice. Yes, I could move forward, but should I? Should I sacrifice these things that are really important to me, like an environment of forgiveness, an environment of emotional intimacy, an environment of safety, an environment of togetherness that I wasn't really even experiencing at that time? And the answer is, I should have been like, whoa, those are big things, I need to wait. So again, I guess the whole point of that is to say that you go in, for your story, family is important, but you really cared about this woman. You really loved her, and you felt, you know what, because I love her, I should set these things aside, right? Uh, but then what you maybe experience later is I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth, but maybe what you're wrestling with now is, no, that's really important. And so the next partner that I find, that's going to be something that's like front and center. Like if you're not willing to go on that part of this journey with me and have a family and kids, because that's what I want, we need to, cut it off now, pull off the
Yeah.
band-aid quick. I don't know, so
Yeah. And you're not putting words in my mouth. That is true with where I'm at work. But I think one thing that I was sacrificing, or you talk about patience, right?
right.
Um, the only time that patience matters is if you truly believe that after you wait, then what you were waiting for is going to happen.
Yes, right. Yeah.
If you're patient, but there's no end date, there's no timeline,
Right.
then you're just waiting for nothing.
Right.
That was something that, dynamic changed where, it was, uh, in the mix. And then over time, like the idea changed. And then, you're like, okay, well, maybe this person will change their mind again and it'll be important for them again. So it was just this, constant flip flop. And because of that roller coaster of emotions for me on my end. But I guess, moving forward, for you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if we don't want to talk about it, we can, but, um, you know, finalizing things with the divorce, where do you go now from as far as starting new relationships, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that's again, I would say that's something that I really wrestled with. For me, again, kind of that people pleasing performance side of things, duty, let's say it's another thing, a whole another part of my story we can talk about, which is the idea of duty, was, for me, it was, it was a long process of trying to reconcile, wrestling through the fact that this wasn't working, reconciliation wasn't working, but still trying to wait, still trying to have hope. And then eventually got to the point where it's clear that there wasn't going to be change. And then that's when I decided to ask for the divorce. For me, I had gone through a lot of stuff before then and through the whole process to where once I made the decision, I was moving forward. Like there's no looking back. And that's just part of who I am. It's like, it took me a long, long, long time to get there. But then once I get there, I'm gone, I'm out. And so the duty part of me would have been like, okay, but you have to wait until the divorce is final to then even consider a next relationship. And that's probably, I would have to admit, that's the safest thing to do. It's the most conservative thing to do. But for me, I was wanting and desiring relationship, even if it was just having coffee, going to a movie,
Yeah,
hanging out with
companionship.
friends. Yeah, companionship. Exactly, companionship.
Hmm.
So I made the decision. I made the decision that even during the process, I was going to start seeing people, and I'd never seen any. I'd never cheated on my spouse, never ever even close to that. But I made the decision in the divorce process to go ahead and start seeing people, not let my kids know or anything like that. Um, and made sure with my attorney that it wasn't illegal, or anything like that, which is not. It's not advisable, but it's
Right.
not illegal. And so I started seeing people, not with the hope of like finding someone, but just companionship, like you said. Um, but things happen in strange ways, and I met someone who was not expecting to this early, let's say, who is amazing, and is checking a lot of those boxes that I told you about before that maybe I wasn't really willing to be honest with myself about. You know, kindness, emotional maturity, compassion, um, wanting to engage relationally, on a very emotional and relational level, open conversations, safety, all of these things, that being yourself and feeling like you can mess up and be understood instead of judged and condemned. There are all these dynamics that I experienced really quickly with this person. And we started just saying, okay, you know what? We're not going to see anyone else. We're just going to hang out with each other. And so I don't know where this is going to go. I have thoughts, ideas, and hopes, and we both do, but I'm not trying to move too fast. But that was just one of these things where I have to own that decision that I was willing to do it. And there's a lot of people, a lot of good friends, family that strongly disagree with what I'm doing. And in the past, what I would have done? I would have been like, okay, well, I'm just not going to do it because I'm going to please these other people, or I'm going to absolve responsibility for my behavior by listening to their advice. But I've learned that I have to take ownership of me, even when that disappoints other people. So this is where I am. Um, I'm, of course, life's not perfect, but I'm certainly um, in a very good place right now, still continuing to grow. And I'm with someone right now that I'm just enjoying our time and enjoying our connectivity, um, and hoping and praying to see this go on. But time will tell, right?
Yeah. I think one of the great things about that testimony is here you are, in your 40s, still growing as a person,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know what I mean? And I think we get caught up, again, you got married at 22, 23. We get caught up at such a young age of trying to prove that we have it all figured out already,
right.
or trying to be successful, whatever the success means at a young age. That, and again, the way social media pictures everything, that everyone's successful at such a young age, when the reality of the truth is things just take time. Working on yourself, working on your career, nothing happens overnight unless you win the lottery, and even then, a lot of those people aren't really enjoying themselves. Well,
Right, right.
for a lot of reasons, but
Yep.
um, one thing for me, you shared your experience of how you're able to move forward into new relationships. One of the things that I kind of had a moment of clarity that really helped me kind of move along, even if you don't want to move on, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that, if I'm being honest with you, I didn't by any means
Yeah.
want to move on. Was I've been happily single now for 5 months here, and I've been working on myself, growing, have passion projects with both this podcast and things at work have been going well, and um, you know I'm again dancing as much as I possibly can because just a way to express myself, and going to therapy, and I've lost 30 pounds since
Mm.
November, just working on my own physical health, because physical health is mental health, all these
Yep.
things, right?
Yep.
These check boxes. And so I've done all this growing. And then you kind of just wonder, on the flip side, how that other person might be doing.
Mm.
And then I came to find out not too long ago that, that person's still very much um, bitter
Mm.
about the whole situation. Whereas, for me, where I'm at is, just wanting the best for them.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so I kind of one thing I had to really look at myself was like, if you respect yourself as much as you say you do, um, then why are you tormenting yourself um, over someone that's only bitter with you, and that's all they have right now for
Mm.
you, after, even though it's been um, however long. Um, and so while I will continue to always be that person that wants the best for anyone that I've ever experienced in life, um, you got to keep moving on with yours, if whatever whatever that might mean. So
Well, and I know we're close to time, but I do want to echo something. I'd love to talk about it some other time, but two
maybe
things.
over a beer.
Yeah, exactly. Two things quickly. One is I think we are all from a very early age tricked, especially in our Western society, into the fallacy of thinking that we will arrive eventually. Meaning at age 25, when you're, let's say, have a great career, or 30, let's say, when you're a great career, you're married, you have two young kids, you have a house, all this sort of stuff, you've arrived and now you can really enjoy life, right? That is a complete and utter lie. Let me tell you, at almost 47 years old, like you said, I am learning this in spades. It is, you are always growing. You are always going to have ups and downs. You're never going to arrive. You will have your good days. You will have your bad days. You will continue to be challenged. You will continue to grow and become a different person. And sometimes you're going to fail and sometimes you're going to succeed, but that's going to continue on throughout life. I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, again, this fallacy that we need to seek the absence of pain. We need to seek the absence of struggle. That again is a complete fallacy. And Jesus says, "In this world you will have trouble." Stop. End of story. But I have overcome the world. But the first point is that in this world you will have trouble. We always will. But in that struggle, you grow. When you work out, it hurts. You grow. When you have to study and it's painful and it takes forever, but you end up growing as a person. This is life. And so to try to seek out a scenario in which, okay, now I've arrived, now I'm happy. It seems so obvious how much of a lie it is, but we believe it every day. And so I appreciate you saying that you're encouraged that you see that I'm 47 and I'm still like seeking to grow. But I think that's everyone. The older you get, the more you understand about how vitally important that is. That you're never going to arrive, and that should be an encouragement actually instead of a discouragement.
Yeah. Well, I think that could be a summary of the whole conversation: is you're
Yeah.
never going to arrive.
Yeah.
You're always going to keep learning and trying to be a better version of yourself. And I guess we'll end things there then.
Yep.
Again, Matt, thank you so much for spending the time here today to share your story and your experience. And for the people listening and watching, uh, I I know Matt as the guy next door. I don't really know as much, or didn't know as much about how he came to be where he's at now. So it was just as you guys were meeting him, so was I. And as always, thank you for listening. If you or anyone is kind of going through the same situation that Matt is or that I am, just life likes to beat you down. You're not alone by any means, and it's not wrong to to feel like you might be lost or whatever it might be. But if you or anyone you know is going through this, share this with them. And as always, if you feel like you need a friend, you can come meet mine. We'll see you all next week.